Hi, welcome back to another episode of Traditional Gourmet. Tonight we're going to be focusing on a traditional favorite, chicken noodle soup. Chicken noodle soup is one of those things that's very versatile, it's very easy, and it's just something that you can play around with and make your own. But there's a very basic recipe that you can use as a foundation to come up with whatever you want. I make chicken noodle soup for my wife pretty much every week. She takes it to work. She loves it. That's what she has for lunch almost every day. But of course, I don't want to send her to work all the time with the same soup. But essentially, it is chicken noodle soup. And then I just put my own little twist on it each week and based on sometimes just whatever's in the pantry. And it usually comes out great. No issues. And it works out well. So I'm going to run through the basic recipe and then we'll go in and add a little bit of whatever's in the pantry at the end and see where we end up. Stay tuned. All right, here we are back at the stove. So we'll get the pot rice and hot here, and then I've also got about half a gallon of water heating up because we're going to put the water in the pot somewhere in the middle, and if it's already hot, that's just going to reduce the amount of cooking time that we are at the stove. So I'll tell you, let's go ahead and get started. Now, you should know by now, I love cooking with extra virgin olive oil. Now, I know a lot of people think, yeah, you cook the oil and then you end up destroying a lot of the flavor. Yes, that's true. However, it's a lot healthier than canola oil or a lot of other oils that are out there on the market. It's all natural, of course, and I just like using that for myself and my family. So we got our oil in there. We're going to swirl it around a little bit. We're going to start off with some onion. Got about 2 cups of onion. Oh yeah, that thing's nice and hot now. All right, so we'll cook our onion. And what we want to do is, technically, this is called sweating the onion. And as the oil and the heat work its way into the onion, it's going to cause the onion to start extracting its liquid as the cells break down, simulating sweating. Hence the term sweating. So we got that going. This is just onion. Next, we're going to start off with, I've got some chopped garlic. I've also got some fresh ginger in here. It just adds a little bit of a pop. Nice little peppery, just effervescent flavor. I also have some chilies. Chili from the garden. I've got a habanero in there because my wife does like some spicy food. And then I got some cayennes. And these cayennes are more on the sweeter side than the spicier side. So they'll add a nice little flavor as well. And then that's it. The chilies, the garlic, and the ginger. So we'll add that in as well. Stir that up, turn the heat up a little bit. We've got this currently now at medium. And the idea is you want to have enough heat going into the pot to maintain that cooking temperature, but you don't want to have too much heat that it starts to burn. So you got to find that delicate balance as you work your way through your cooking process. So I can still hear the sizzling, which means I've got enough heat in it and it's doing what it needs to do. I can smell the onion and the garlic and the ginger and all of that aroma is coming up. And it's cooking quite nicely. So we'll stir this. We'll let this cook a little bit. Now the smell of that ginger is coming out. That's going to be a nice addition to this soup. So next, we're going to add some carrots. Very traditional. Basic chicken noodle soup, you're going to have onion, garlic, carrot, and celery. Like I said, we've added the chilies, we've added some ginger, and it's just going to add a nice little extra flavor to it. Yeah, so later we'll add some stuff in the pantry. Now I'm adding some stuff that I got out of the garden. Alright, so we'll let that cook probably about 4 or 5 minutes, and then we'll come back, take a quick look at it, and we'll go from there. Okay, so now our carrots are starting to sweat, which basically means they literally look like they're starting to sweat. They're expelling some moisture, and the aroma is starting to come out as well. Next up, celery. So So I've got about a cup and a half of celery. That was a cup and a half of carrots roughly, and then about 2 cups of onion. So once again, we'll just cook this down. And remember, you want to put these ingredients in stages so you're not cooling the pot down too much. And of course, you don't want too much heat into it, or you could burn the bottom. And if you burn the bottom, you get what's called a scorch flavor, and it's not very pleasant. So we're going to go ahead and let this go, and then we'll come back to it in a minute. And if you can tell by the sound, the pot is starting to pick up some heat. You have a lot more moisture being expelled into the pot from the vegetables, and it's hitting the bottom of the pan and creating all this steam, and of course making all that sound, which tells you that the cooking process is taking place. So that's looking pretty good. Next, we're going to go ahead and add our chicken. This is roughly 2 pounds of chicken. I like to use chicken thigh meat. I think it has more flavor and more moisture than chicken breast. So you can do that. Some other things you're going to do, if you have more time, you can basically take a whole chicken, poach it in some water, throw in some aromatics, and by aromatics I mean celery, carrot, onion, maybe some bay leaves, some peppercorns, whatever's in the pantry, and make a stock out of that. And that stock you'll use later in the soup. You would basically then cool that chicken down, pull it apart, throw the bones back in the stock, let that simmer for 30 minutes or so, and then while that's simmering, you can basically break down that chicken and chop it up to whatever size you want. Probably, smaller than 1 inch would be adequate. All right, so we got this. Till we're losing a little bit of heat, I'm going to crank this up some more. Get our chicken going. Also, some white wine. My wife drinks Pinot Grigio, so it's always in the house. So I'm going to add about half a cup to this. Normally you wouldn't add white wine to it, but this is one of those opportunities where you make it your own. You could do red wine, you could do brandy, you could do sherry, you could Madeira. There's any number of combinations. So anyway, that's in there. As you can hear, it's cooled down quite a bit. So I'm going to turn the heat up a little more, and we'll come back to it in probably 3 or 4 more minutes. Okay, so we got some heat coming back into this. Just give it a quick stir. You see that chicken is still raw for the most part. So we do want to go ahead and cook that before we move on to the next step. Alright, so it looks like our chicken is getting pretty close to being done. You do want to make sure it is fully cooked, obviously, before you eat it or taste it, just to be on the safe side. One thing to take into consideration is the chicken you put into this can be pretty much anything. You could take some chicken breast, marinate it, put it on the grill, dice it up, throw it in there. You could roast some off in the oven. You could, if you get one of those rotisserie chickens from the grocery store and you got half of it left, break it down and throw it in. Anything, any extra chicken you have sitting around can go right into the soup. It's that versatile. And then that will only add to the flavor profiles that you have already put into place. So this looks good. We're going to go ahead and add our water, which is already hot. And of course, you are using, it is hot water, so you want to be very careful. Alright, so we're going to just let that sit, come to a light simmer, and then we'll move on to the next step. One thing to remember, you can take that liquid, you can add chicken base to it and make a little bit of a flavorful chicken stock. I got some other stuff we're going to put in later, but for right now, we'll just let this come to a simmer, which shouldn't take too long, and we'll be right back. Alright, now we've reached this simmer, so I'm going to go ahead and turn this down to like a medium low, and then we'll start adding our flavorings. I'm going to do a teaspoon of garlic powder. We'll do 2 teaspoons of onion powder. We'll do a teaspoon of dried basil. I would prefer fresh herbs, but don't currently have any. But once again, just using what you have in the pantry. So it's a teaspoon of dried oregano, and then finally we have a teaspoon of dried thyme. So we'll stir that in. And to that, we're going to add just a hint of balsamic vinegar that adds a little bit of sweetness and a little bit of acidity. You could also do lime juice or lemon juice. Lemon and chicken go together very well. Then we have some soy sauce. Soy sauce is going to add some salt and a little bit of background flavor. And then Worcestershire sauce. Love this stuff. We're going to put some of that in too, and that will add to our background flavors and really bring everything else to the forefront. It's going to be our supporting actors, really helping all the other flavors come together. So this is still at a simmer. We're going to go ahead and put in, I had some peas and corn and green beans in the freezer, so we'll add that in. Once again, just going through the pantry, the freezer, whatever's in the garden. So our chicken noodle soup is kind of turning into more like chicken and vegetable soup, but we're still going to put some noodles in it. If you wanted to, you could not put the noodles in and put in some potatoes or maybe even some rice. Once again, very versatile. So you've got a basic foundation to start with, and you can really build on it from there. So we're going to let this come back to a simmer. Come back to the next and final step. Stay tuned. We've come back to a simmer. Now it's time to add some salt. You can use whatever salt you prefer, kosher salt, iodized salt. I have this Peruvian pink salt that my mother-in-law brings me every time she comes to visit. I really like the flavor. It's really nice. So we're going to go ahead and get that in, stir it up. Just continue to add salt until you get to the level you want. Everybody has a different preference when it comes to salt. Some like light, some prefer a little bit heavier on the salt flavor. But keep in mind, you can always add more, but you can't add less. And so it's better to go in small increments, stir it in. It has to dissolve before it really spreads throughout the soup and you get the full flavor. So it's important to make sure you just do it in small increments. So I'm going to go ahead and get the seasoning where I want it. And we'll be back in a second. Okay, I've got the salt level where I want it. I can taste the Worcestershire, the soy sauce, the balsamic vinegar. I can taste the ginger and the garlic. But none of those flavors really stand out on their own. And that's what you want. You want all the flavors to work together, to work in unison, to give you that final flavor profile that really says, this is what I want. This is how I wanted it to turn out. And even if it doesn't turn out the way exactly you want it, it still can be really good. But the point is, don't overdo it on one ingredient. Add them in small increments, the salt included, the soy sauce, whatever you want to add to it. Add it a little bit at a time, get the flavor where you want it, and then leave it alone. The last thing we're going to do is stir in the pasta. Now I found this trick. I found a trick years ago when making soup, that if I took the raw pasta, added it into the hot soup, and basically just let it sit. I can actually pull this off now, and I'm going to chill it down. But the soup is so hot, it's going to cook the pasta. The pasta is going to absorb the liquid. It's going to absorb the flavor from the soup, as opposed to boiling it in a pot of water and just tasting like salted water. It's going to absorb the flavor from the soup. But in addition to that, it's not likely to over-absorb and get all mushy and fall apart. That's the good thing about it. So at this point, I've checked my flavor, I've added my pasta, I've stirred that in, it's come back to a simmer, which it's important to make sure you hit that proper simmer so that it is safe. You've taken it back up to a safe temperature, and then we're going to put this to chill. And tomorrow morning, wife's going to have chicken noodle soup for work. Anyway, that's it. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Hit me up with some comments if you got any questions, if you need some ideas. If you have some ideas of your own, love to see them. That's it for now. See you next time.